Hello, this is Alex Glenn, and welcome to the North Carolina Smart Grid webinar series. We are very pleased you guys decided to take time out of your schedule to join us. Again, my name is Alex Glenn, and I work with Advanced Energy as a trainer, energy consultant, and instructional designer. And I've worked in energy efficiency and the clean tech industry for 15 years, so I'm happy to be your host and your facilitator for today's webinar. Now, real quick, as an independent nonprofit that works with most of North Carolina's electric utilities, Advanced Energy's mission is to help our state's electric utility customers get the most value out of the money that they spend for energy. Now, this webinar series is being developed using North Carolina Public Benefit Funds administered by Advanced Energy and Duke Energy, along with generous technical support from North Carolina's electric membership cooperatives, Duke Energy, and Dominion NC Power. So as North Carolina's electric utilities are modernizing their power generation and distribution systems, this transformation of our electric grid, it offers performance and growth opportunities for North Carolina and the nation. And we're happy to bring you information about smart grid technologies and systems that are being deployed here in NC and how you might be able to benefit from them. So today, we continue our 2018 Smart Grid webinar series with an educational webinar on the interconnections between smart grid and economic development. Up to this point, our grid modernization webinars have had more of a technology focus. So we're shifting a bit today, and we're excited to explore some of the economic impacts a smart grid has for North Carolina citizens, communities, and businesses. Now, economic development is a very broad topic, and as such, we'll not be able to cover everything today. So we want to start by focusing on some of the activities currently underway in North Carolina related to grid modernization that are positioning our state to remain globally competitive as a place to locate and operate a business. We'd like to hear from you during this webinar, so please feel free to post your questions and your comments in the Q&A box on the upper right side of your screen. We'll address your comments and answer any of these questions as we can during the Q&A period at the end of our presentation. Now, before we dive in, I'd like to mention our website where all of these smart grid resources are available to you. We have case studies, educational videos, upcoming events, and links to all of our smart grid resources, so please make sure to visit ncsmartgrid.org to access this wealth of information. And please note, we're recording this webinar today, and we'll make that recording available to you in a follow-up email where you can access it as well as all the links to the additional smart grid resources. So today, we're very pleased to have Susan Sanford and Mike Burnette join us as we explore interconnecting smart grid and economic development in North Carolina. Susan Sanford is the Executive Director of the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster. RTCC is an initiative of business, government, academic, and nonprofit leaders focused on accelerating the growth of the Research Triangle region's clean tech economy. Mike Burnette serves as Chief Operating Officer for North Carolina's electric cooperatives. NCEMC is a Raleigh-based organization that supplies power and transmission services to 25 member electric cooperatives throughout the state. Thank you both for joining us to share your expertise on economic development activities in North Carolina. Now, I'll start with a brief overview of some of the benefits of grid modernization and talk about how those benefits support economic development. Then we'll have both Susan and Mike share information about grid mod efforts, impacts, and opportunities on North Carolina's economy. At the end, I'll come back and provide a summary of the highlights from today's webinar, share a new case study developed by Advanced Energy about energy, and facilitate a Q&A period for you to ask questions and offer any comments about the webinar today. So, let's dive in. I'd like to first focus on some of the key benefits that grid modernization offers citizens and businesses in North Carolina, which include reliability, resiliency, readiness, and sustainability. Let's look at some of the ways these benefits are connected to economic development. Now, customers depend on electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. While our power system is very reliable, outages still occur due to storms, icing, and accidents. Avoiding and reducing outages while providing faster restoration times when outages do occur is very important. Strengthening the power grid against these physical impacts, as well as protecting against cyber attacks, is essential. Right now, North Carolina has hundreds of companies serving the grid supply chain, the smart grid supply chain, from early-stage startups to multinational businesses. Improving the reliability, affordability, quality, and sustainability of electric power helps North Carolina attract and retain industries such as pharmaceuticals, data centers, advanced manufacturing, and many more, supporting the economic growth of North Carolina. Also, communities can improve the resiliency of their critical infrastructure and prepare for residents or businesses to install new energy technologies. In past webinars, we've discussed how microgrids are one smart grid technology that are independent power systems which are designed to take over for the electric grid during a power outage, and how they can help local governments keep critical systems online. They can provide seamless backup power that serve communications, traffic control, water and wastewater treatment facilities. They can also incorporate solar panels to increase the length of time they can provide power without needing a conventional fuel supply. And that's how our municipalities can be ready. In addition, community sustainability is also a key benefit of grid mod, which includes both environmental and economic sustainability. Rezoning properties to permit energy production can generate new income for landowners and improve the tax base for local governments. Solar projects can offer economies of scale, along with cost-effective siting and maintenance. Smart meters can enable performance measurement from a part of a building to an entire city. Electric vehicle charging stations are growing in number and size as well. And as more businesses, institutions, and local governments establish emissions reduction targets, the transition to a smart grid provides an effective tool to reach those goals. Now, as we transition to how a smart grid industry and various grid mod technologies support the development of North Carolina's economy, let's take a look at these key areas of growth, investment, business, and workforce. As previously mentioned, improving the quality, reliability, affordability, and sustainability of electric power helps North Carolina retain and attract new industries. In a little bit, Susan and Mike will discuss how businesses benefit from the growth of the smart grid industry, and they will share a few examples of projects that make North Carolina a leader. Now, significant investments are being made to modernize the grid, including hardening of the existing infrastructure and the implementation of self-optimizing technologies, smart meters, energy storage systems, microgrids, and renewable energy systems. These investments have direct positive implications for North Carolina, including improved resiliency and dependability of the grid for both citizens and businesses. In terms of business development, North Carolina's regional business partnerships and electric utilities help drive economic development. NC is home to one of the nation's largest electric companies, along with statewide networks of municipal utilities and electric membership co-ops. Deployment of a smart grid creates business opportunities by providing our state with a competitive edge when it comes to recruiting new business to North Carolina. And another factor that has supported the growth of the smart grid industry in our state is our abundant skilled workforce. The high quality of North Carolina's community colleges and universities offering multiple programs helps create the skilled workforce for our smart grid industry. Now that said, we won't be focusing too heavily on workforce development today, but we plan to explore this area in a future webinar. So, building on the broad look of those benefits of smart grid technologies and how the benefits are connected to economic development, I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker. Susan Sanford brings a broad mix of skills and personal traits to her role as the Executive Director of the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster. Susan is a public sector leader who has worked with federal, county, and citizen stakeholders to create land use recommendations for publicly owned farmland. She also helps advance RTCC's mission to promote collaboration in order to create a competitive advantage for both companies and the region to advance company growth and attract clean tech investment. Susan is going to provide us insight into the clean tech industry and the various activities, applications, and impacts it's having here in North Carolina. I'd like to pass the baton now to Susan. Susan?
Am I still on mute? Good morning.
Good
morning, Alex and Mike and everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity and for everyone who's joining and will listen to this webinar down the road. I believe my role in today's webinar is to share with you a little information about clean tech and a little about our organization, RTCC, and explain the role that a smart grid plays in advancing clean technologies and economic development. I will say up front that we are a resource, so if this webinar brings up questions for you, please follow up with us. We're happy to be of service. So our organization is a not-for-profit. It was started 6 years ago by industry leaders, including the North Carolina Electric Cooperatives, Electricities, Duke Energy, and other industry leaders, and with a single mission of advancing the clean tech industry in the Research Triangle region. And so our economic development is very much in our DNA. And we use the triple helix of economic development, which I think is sort of part of the identity of North Carolina, bringing government, industry, and academia together to advance economic development. So our organization's name is the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster, which is a mouthful, but a lot of people ask, what is clean tech? It's such a broad and nebulous term. And broadly, we define clean tech as any product or service or technology that reduces energy consumption as well as increases profit for the organization providing the service. So it has that profit-driven imperative. It's a little bit more than sustainability and turning off the lights when you leave the room. There was research that came out about 6 years ago more explicitly defining clean tech. And I share this with you not so you have to memorize each of these industries, but to show you that clean tech is quite broad. It incorporates renewables and solar, energy storage, vehicles, clean water. But what I'd like for the audience to know is that, to reach many of the goals that our communities are setting for themselves, whether that's deploying electric vehicles or increasing clean energy and solar deployment, the grid is really the key piece of infrastructure for enabling communities to reach those goals. And that's the point of our conversation this morning. A little bit about the clean tech industry in North Carolina. The clean tech industry is a competitive advantage for our state. Overall, North Carolina is growing very quickly in clean energy jobs. We had a speaker come in about 2 weeks ago to talk about energy jobs in the state. And across the nation, something like 45% of energy jobs are clean energy jobs. In North Carolina, that's about 65%, which means we have made the shift to clean energy jobs a lot faster than the rest of the country. Here in the Research Triangle region, the clean tech industry has grown by 24% over the last 5 years, and more than 27,000 people work in that field. So if you know young people who are deciding on what they want to be when they grow up, definitely point them to the clean tech industry. It is much more than just engineering. It's also computer science, marketing, and finance, and is a great industry to work in. In North Carolina and in the Research Triangle, we have many assets, not just multinational companies, but also entrepreneurs and startups. We are #1 in clean tech patents in the country per million residents. So a great sort of culture of innovation here in this region. And since we're talking about economic development, Cleantech provides $1.6 billion in annual investments, at least to the Research Triangle region, and that's through capital assets, taxes on capital assets, payroll, etc. I'm not advancing my slides. I share this next bit of information with you to show that clean tech is an industry that has the ability to make an impact across a region, not just in an urban core. It encompasses research and development, but also manufacturing, as Alex mentioned, solar. In 2013, RTI International we commissioned them to do some research for us, and they found that clean tech was the only industry that had a new company location or a company expansion in each of the counties in the Research Triangle region, which was great to learn, because that meant that clean tech also drives jobs to our rural communities as well. And so kind of going back to what's driving clean tech and why are we talking about smart grid, understanding that a smart grid is key to deploying clean tech and renewables. We are seeing more and more communities like Hillsborough driven by their residents, sort of drawing a line in the sand and saying we're going to be 100% clean energy driven by a certain year. And so very much the residents of North Carolina are driving clean tech and the need for a smarter grid. Industry also, we're talking about economic development this morning, are driving the necessity of having a smart grid. In order to attract companies like Apple or even large manufacturers, many of these companies have from their corporate headquarters mandates to be powered by clean energy. And so being able to provide that to those companies means that we will be more competitive in being able to attract and retain them. And I wanted to give the folks on the webinar a few examples of clean tech and smart grid solutions. This is such a great example from Charlotte. The City of Charlotte partnered with the utility Duke Energy as well as several other partners, Cisco and Itron and others, to achieve economic development goals. So the City of Charlotte wanted to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the downtown core. They also wanted to retain companies in that downtown area, business district, and be able to attract new companies. And so they work with 60 building owners and the utility to deploy smart meters. And you can see in that picture a kiosk in one of the building's lobbies. And so tenants and building owners were able to see their energy consumption and sort of peer compete against each other. And that initiative was so successful, it drove down energy consumption by 19% and now the City of Charlotte is incorporating water usage into that project. So a great example of how a smart grid can drive community goals and economic development. And here's another example from the Triangle region. In Johnston County, Grifols is the largest employer. They've invested so far more than $200 million in the county, and they've just become LEED, I think it's LEED Silver certified. They're the first LEED Silver certified building in Johnston County. And part of their package to attain that was to provide electric vehicle infrastructure. So you can imagine the challenge to the grid if every employee at Grifols plugs in their electric vehicle. So having a smart grid is key to enabling these businesses to attain, their CSR goals as well as their sustainability goals, and to be able to attract and retain them in our communities. So those are just a few examples of clean tech and the importance of having a smart grid. Overall, I wanted to share with the folks on this webinar a little of North Carolina's competitive advantage in this space. We are home to one of the largest electric utilities in the U.S., and as we'll hear from Mike, some of the most innovative co-ops in the country. We are second in the United States for solar capacity, only behind California. We have the highest concentration of smart grid companies in the world here in the Research Triangle, and those are companies that are working on Internet of Things applications related to the grid. We have one of 10 U.S. Department of Transportation test sites for autonomous vehicles, which are all going to be electric vehicles, so it's related to the grid. And so we are positioned well to capture economic development benefits from a smarter grid. And I hope I'm under time, but I'll just leave you with the idea that economic development is very much a team sport. Reaching these community goals like Hillsborough has set will take collaboration and partnership from organizations like ours, from the utility, from local government, academia and industry. So I would say look to us as a resource if you have questions or would like to learn from other communities, and we would be happy to be of service. So Alex, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, great. Susan, thank you so much. It was helpful to see everything that is going on here in the state with clean tech, and to see and understand the importance of smart grid here for our businesses. And folks, this is Susan's contact information and the Research Triangle Cleantech's website, so please feel free to visit their website and to connect with Susan after today's webinar. And again, Susan, thank you for helping us see some of the investment that's going on here in the Triangle region, and understand some of the financial impacts of clean energy technologies. So for a little bit of a different perspective, I'd like to take the time to move to our second guest speaker today, Mike Burnette. Mike serves as Chief Operating Officer for North Carolina's electric cooperatives. In his role, Mike oversees the power supply portfolio, including operations, engineering, and assets. He also leads a team responsible for innovative energy solutions, including microgrid projects and grid mod technologies. Mike provides guidance to the CEO regarding corporate development, planning, and management effectiveness. Mike is going to bring the valuable perspective of the utility to today's webinar, and he will share insight into the various activities of electric co-ops in the state. So I'm going to pass the baton to Mike and let him share some of this valuable information with us today. Mike?
Thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone. Let me begin by telling you a little bit about who we are and what we do. Our tagline or resounding message is driven by service and inspired by innovation. Hopefully, by the conclusion of this presentation, you will have an understanding of what we mean. Cooperatives in general are organizations owned and operated by its members and governed by a board of directors elected by their members. North Carolina's electric cooperatives are comprised of 26 distinct member-owned, not-for-profit cooperatives. As electric cooperatives, our service is to provide electricity, but our purpose is to support and empower our members and communities through economic development and community outreach. I'm pleased to be a part of this webinar and to share with you what we are doing as it relates to economic development, as well as the ways in which innovation inspires us. But first, let me give you a point of reference to help you understand a little bit more about the communities we serve and why economic development is so important to us. We provide electricity for approximately 2.5 million North Carolinians, which accounts for roughly 24% of the population and almost 45% of North Carolina's land mass. Our service territory, or better said, the members we serve, reside primarily in rural areas of the state. If you compare the state's electric service providers' consumer density, we have approximately 10 consumers per mile of power line, whereas the investor-owned utilities have averaged 23 consumers per mile, and municipal systems have an average service density of slightly over 44 consumers per mile. Hopefully, these numbers will give you a sense of who North Carolina's electric cooperatives are and how. And now let's take a look at our footprint, or where we serve. Beyond providing electricity, each of the 26 not-for-profit cooperatives are investing in their communities and delivering new energy solutions to improve the quality of life for co-op members and approximately 950,000 households and businesses spread throughout 93 of North Carolina's 100 counties. As you can see, we have a significant amount of territory to support. Globally, businesses are declaring sustainability goals, and our peers in the utility industry have made public commitments to reduce carbon within their generation portfolios. These businesses are signaling to their partners and power suppliers the need to be green. Universally, consumers are more environmentally aware and sustainability focused. As leaders in the utility industry, and as an organization committed to its members, it is our responsibility to follow suit. Because we are driven by service to our members and inspired to be a leader in the electric utility industry, we are committed to building a brighter energy future. As a result, we have identified 3 primary business tenets: low carbon, grid flexibility, and beneficial electrification. We are committed to low carbon and have made great strides integrating alternative energy sources into our generation portfolio used to serve our members. We are developing and installing microgrids in coordination with our members. These are an excellent example of grid flexibility, and I'll tell you a little more about our 2 microgrid projects in a few minutes. Beneficial electrification is somewhat of a buzzword, and I will dig a little deeper into that shortly. But first, let's talk about a smart grid in the co-op world. Connecting rural North Carolinians to smarter grid technology is imperative to improving the quality of life. Understanding this priority, North Carolina's electric cooperatives have developed a cooperative fiber network that will enable high-speed broadband service. And with the deployment of this service, we will be able to connect businesses to not only a local and regional economy, but also to a global economy as well. Job-producing corporations have grown in their sophistication and use of energy management systems and technology. And now they expect utility integration with their facilities. Having broadband service available will enable this interconnection, providing an economic development opportunity for us in North Carolina. When we think about innovation and technology, we also think about big data. Data collection is imperative to building the right infrastructure in the right places at the right time for efficiencies and to avoid stranded assets. Rural broadband will allow us to deploy the latest innovations and technologies where they are needed most, improving system resiliency and enabling energy cost-saving strategies for our members. Additionally, this broadband connectivity provides an opportunity to impact the rural area workforce. One of our members in the northeastern part of the state, Roanoke Electric, has invested $4 million to develop broadband technology that will not only increase grid flexibility and efficiency, but also provide a broadband connection to underserved homes and businesses in the region of the state, creating a newly educated workforce and jobs. With these new opportunities comes an improvement to the quality of life for the region and the state. Our members are eager to grow their communities. They understand that retention is just as important as new business when it comes to economic development. Our cooperatives are engaged with their member consumers. They communicate with their businesses in their community, and they listen to the needs of the ones they serve. They have been serving as economic development professionals in their communities for years and are eager to make a significant impact with the help of partner organizations. Here are just some of these economic partnerships. Mojo Tone in Bregal, North Carolina, partnered with the town of Bregal, Pender County, Wilmington Business Development, and 4-County Electric Membership Corporation to expand their operation. Tourism is a major business in North Carolina, and North Carolina's electric cooperatives serve from the mountains to the coast. As the adoption and use of electric vehicles increases, we recognize the need to begin the development of a statewide charging network. This network benefits both the communities dependent on tourism as well as the EV owner by decreasing any perceived range anxiety. There are currently 30 co-op charging stations at 23 locations across the state. To give a few examples, Randolph EMC recently opened 4 new charging stations at the North Carolina Zoo, which is one of the state's most visited attractions. Cape Hatteras Electric Cooperative just debuted 2 charging stations on Hatteras Island along the state's Outer Banks. Brunswick EMC has charging stations in 6 beach communities in its service area, and 4-County EMC has a station just off Interstate 40 on the way to and from the coast. In the West, Blue Ridge Energy has helped install charging stations in the idyllic mountain towns of West Jefferson and Blowing Rock, as well as in the city of Lenoir. Lastly, and maybe the most important, is investing in our youth through an educational grant program called Bright Ideas. For 25 years, the electric co-ops have offered Bright Ideas education grants to teachers in K through 12 classrooms across the state. Bright Idea grants provide funding for innovative classroom projects that would otherwise not be possible. The impact from this program is truly impressive. Since 1994, it has affected the lives of more than 2.2 million students by providing more than $11.5 million in funding. As we continue to talk about economic development, we have to be cognizant of how the playing field has changed, particularly in North Carolina. We have to position ourselves to tackle the new truths challenge. If we are to provide benefit to both the consumer and businesses, large and small, these challenges are identifying ways to generate new revenue and increase cost efficiencies. New revenue for utilities and businesses needs to be captured through economic development to recruit new load and through beneficial electrification efforts. As for cost efficiencies, that means finding ways to drive out inefficiencies in operations and production processes, and determining when and where to invest capital. Capital is hard to come by, but there are measures we can take to improve existing infrastructure in a way that allows more flexibility and ultimately allows us to defer investment in capital costs. Those measures are mainly in the form of technology, and they not only make it more economical to serve members, but they also put our members in greater control of the resources on their systems. Let's discuss these two thoughts in a little more detail. A key component to economic development is beneficial electrification. Beneficial electrification is a concerted effort to transition to using electric power in areas of transportation, agriculture, and manufacturing. This effort provides a wide range of benefits across many sectors, from improved energy efficiency and reduced carbon emissions to cost savings and increased productivity. For our rural areas, finding ways to increase revenue in the form of new electric load is critical to economic vitality, and that leads to a brighter energy future for all. Pictured here are just a few areas we're focusing on. In agriculture, replacing diesel-powered equipment with ones that are battery-powered. In processing applications, identifying efficient clean technologies such as UV sterilization and IR drying to reduce chemical and water use. In transportation, moving away from gas and diesel fuel vehicles and converting them to an electric fleet. As we talked about earlier, we are facilitating the build-out of a charging network within the state. But as more EVs are placed into service, we believe others will add to the charging infrastructure also. The second challenge I want to address deals with efficiencies and capital deployment. We are proud to say we are leading the state and nation in transforming the microgrid concept into a cutting-edge reality because we recognize the value microgrids can provide to cooperative communities. Here are two examples. The Ocracoke Island microgrid is located on North Carolina's Outer Banks. The island itself covers roughly 9.6 square miles and has a population of 948 permanent residents. But it is heavily driven by tourism from an economic development perspective. We partnered with Tideland Electric Membership Corporation, the local cooperative serving the island, and installed the microgrid in February 2017. As we all know, Ocracoke Island's remote location leaves it vulnerable during major weather events like hurricanes. Being isolated from central station generation, the microgrid provides several key benefits. One, it supports better power reliability for the island. Two, it serves as a resource that can be called on during times of peak demand. And three, it serves as a learning model for us and other cooperatives. Tourism, fishing, and aqua business are the economic engine of the island. Knowing the municipality has an integrated microgrid, increasing the electric system resiliency will help sustain those businesses, providing a brighter energy future to the island and the region. The Butler Farms microgrid is located in Lillington, North Carolina, and the goal for this microgrid was to create alternative energy sources for the farm and surrounding community using biogas, solar, and battery storage. The microgrid integrates our components with resources owned by the farm and creates generation that can be used to support the farm's power needs during times when service has been interrupted. The microgrid allows Butler Farms to sell power produced from renewable sources, including swine waste and solar, to its electric cooperative, South River EMC. The microgrid became fully operational in May of this year, and the project has allowed us to learn more about how a microgrid located on a member's property can be incorporated into the electric cooperative's distribution system. The Butler's Farm project has also served as an excellent case study to help us better understand the ways agribusiness and utilities can work together, and to help us develop solutions that are mutually beneficial and support both industries, as well as the quality of life in North Carolina's communities. It's been a real pleasure working with Tom Butler. He's an entrepreneur and farmer, as well as an environmental steward and farming advocate. The Butler Farms project received quite a bit of national attention, and Mr. Butler has become somewhat of a hero. Mr. Butler cares about more than his bottom line. He cares about the community. One of our favorite quotes from Tom is, "We are hoping to build an organization that is industry-changing to rural areas." Tom Butler is the quintessential co-op member. This microgrid is a perfect example of how we, all of us, Mr. Butler, South River EMC, our dedicated staff, put our mission into practice. Not only is it extremely innovative, but it's a perfect example of how we are driven by service to our members. Thank you. It's all yours, Alex.
Well, great. Yeah, and thank you so much, Mike. That was really interesting to learn about everything that is going on with NCEMC and the various cooperatives in the state, and also to think about the new revenue and cost efficiencies that utilities are realizing. And I found it really interesting to learn about the Ocracoke microgrid as well as the Butler Farms microgrid, which are two really great examples of how smart grid is being implemented and is effective and useful here in the state. And again, thank you to Susan, because both Mike and Susan, you guys really helped us learn about the various economic activities taking place and to explore how businesses are benefiting from the growth of the smart grid industry. So thank you both for sharing examples of projects that make North Carolina a leader in grid mod and for discussing the impacts on North Carolina's economy. Before we get into our Q&A portion, I'd really like to take a minute to share a unique story with you about a case study that Advanced Energy has recently developed in collaboration with Duke Energy. Now, economic development efforts are incredibly important for communities, as we know, in order for us to create and retain jobs and to improve the quality of life. It takes a great deal of collaboration between a team of state and local partners to successfully bring new business opportunities to our communities. Now, one criteria that is becoming very important is the presence of a smart, modern, and dependable electric grid. And so for many businesses, losing power even momentarily, such as in the case of manufacturing, can result in enormous losses. These businesses find it vitally important that they can trust in their service provider's ability to always keep electricity flowing. A recent opportunity for Duke Energy arose when a corporation looked at North Carolina for siting its new refrigerated distribution facility. And now, after evaluating over a dozen sites, the corporation zeroed in on a location in rural North Carolina. And the site met much of their selection criteria that they valued. However, they voiced some concerns over how to handle power outages. And this new facility, it was considered to be mission critical for their business, and a glitch at this location would impact their operations across the region. So understanding that power reliability was a major requirement for this business, Duke proposed to build multiple substations closer to the site and to include that area in their self-healing team program, which is part of their current efforts to modernize the grid. The proposed solution offered significant reliability enhancements, and the business agreed to locate their facility in North Carolina, adding 1,000 new jobs to the economy. And so this is just one example of why a smart grid is so important to the development of North Carolina's economy. And as more companies recognize their dependency on a highly reliable energy supply, they start to see the clear advantages that come with being serviced by a smarter, modernized electric grid. And by the way, we just learned that Duke Energy's economic development team was named to Site Selection Magazine's annual list of top utilities in economic development for the 14th consecutive year. Duke has been on the list since 2005, which shows their dedication to collaboration with state and local partners. Now, to read more about that case study, as well as to access all of our smart grid resources, please check out and visit ncsmartgrid.org. And as a reminder, we will send a follow-up email where you can access this recorded webinar as well as the links to the wealth of smart grid information that we have. So one last thing before we get into the Q&A period, we'd like to ask for your input. Now, as we've discussed, as North Carolina's electric utilities are modernizing, change is on the horizon. And as these changes happen, we want to keep you up to date on all of the technologies, the systems, and the issues connected to grid modernization. So we're looking forward to continuing this educational webinar series, and these are some of the future topics that we're considering: workforce development for the NC energy economy, smart grid as a platform for growing smart cities, electric vehicles and the future of transportation, and emerging smart grid technologies. So if you have any additional suggestions that you might have to offer, or you want to comment on which one of these potential topics is most interesting to you and you'd like to see us do a webinar on in 2019, please leave a comment that in the survey that pops up at the end of this webinar on which topics you're most interested in, which subjects you'd like to see us explore. We really appreciate your input. So at this point, let's dive in and let's take a few minutes to answer some of the questions that have come in during the webinar. Please understand that we may not have time today to answer all of the questions, and we may not have an immediate answer to a question, but we'll try our best. In either case, we'll follow up with you after doing some research or finding the best resource for you. So let's take a look at some of the questions that have come in. I think this first one will be best suited for Susan. So Susan, I'm going to, let me read this question and see if you can't help us with the answer. A smart grid, like economic development, it requires collaboration. Can you share some examples of how your organization has collaborated with others to deliver economic benefits to your customers?
Ooh, that's a good question. Gosh, I'd say overall, our organization, the Research Triangle Cleantech Cluster, we collaborate with partners to create connections for our members and for the local governments that we serve. So if a municipality comes to us with a challenge, we will look to industry or other local governments who are facing the same challenge and make connections. And a lot of what we do is on sharing best practices. Some examples, I think Chatham Park might be a good example. So Chatham Park is a development coming online next year in Chatham County, which is a fairly rural county, North Carolina, and it's anticipated to bring, I don't know, something like 60,000 new residents to a town of 9,000 people over the next 30 years. And one of part of the vision for the real estate developers there is that, every resident, every homeowner, every business owner will have electric vehicle charging infrastructure. You can imagine that's pretty cost prohibitive on the front end to put all of those capital assets in place. But it's part of the, the compelling vision to attract people and businesses there. So we've connected them with Duke Energy, which is piloting a program in Florida currently, whereby the utility purchases the infrastructure and then leases it back to business owners or homeowners. And so that's maybe a small example of an organization like ours being able to look out into the industry or the ecosystem to bring back best practices. Another one that we're excited about recently is we have connected the City of Durham with a startup company called State of Place. So the City of Durham has, many community goals, one of which is they want to reduce pedestrian fatalities at crosswalks. And so we've connected them with a company called State of Place that has a walkability platform, and that company is now piloting their technology in Durham. So if that goes well, that may be technology that can be spread throughout the region and perhaps across the state. Those are just a few examples.
Oh, great. Yeah, I know there's a lot going on, so appreciate you sharing some examples with us there. So let's do another question here that's come in, and I think this will be best for Mike to help us answer. Mike, the question is, do you see microgrids as the wave of the future? Are there more coming?
Oh, thanks, Alex. I reckon the short answer is yes. We plan to continue to replicate these concepts for different unique solutions throughout the co-op network in North Carolina. We're also working with our partner co-ops across the country to share our lessons learned. The technology and costs are evolving, and we do see these projects as a step forward toward the future of electric distribution. Microgrids provide more local control and resources, which are beneficial. We're examining ways to put these kinds of technologies to work in the future and are considering how future microgrid projects can be implemented to enhance service to our members. These are great opportunities. Localized distributed generation and smart grids are the wave of the future.
And Mike, I might ask a quick follow-up to that. Why did NCEMC decide to do microgrids?
Several reasons. The electric utility industry is changing, and we wanted to be at the forefront of new technologies as they were emerging. Our board of directors was very supportive of us moving in that direction. Cooperatives are not-for-profit organizations, and as I mentioned earlier, we're really driven to provide the best service possible to our members. And projects like these allow us to test and integrate new ways to improve our service. Yeah, and with this, we saw a unique opportunity to turn challenges faced by respective industries into a win-win that also strengthen the local communities. So when we think about Tom Butler and Butler's Farms and his challenges in that facility, this was a real opportunity. Projects like these are a step towards the future of electricity and can open doors to new opportunities to rural North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some great examples. So thank you so much, Mike. That was very, very helpful. And again, thank you, Susan, for your additions to today's webinar and everything that you helped us understand about Cleantech. So at this time, I think we're going to wrap up. And thanks to everyone who submitted a question and provided a comment. And we certainly hope that each of you found value in today's webinar. If so, would you please help us out by providing your feedback on the survey that pops up at the end of this session so that we can continue to make these events valuable for you? we really appreciate your feedback, especially on future webinar topics. So when this webinar closes, the survey will pop up, and please do take a quick minute to fill that out. It would really help us. And we'd also like to encourage that you share this with your colleagues and your industry contacts. So when the follow-up email comes to you, feel free to forward that along to your network when you receive it. And folks, we're grateful that you chose to take time out of your day to join us. And we really do hope that you have a great day and that you join us for future webinars as we bring them online to you to keep you up to date on everything smart grid. We hope you have a great day and take care.